Recently, I shared how I would basically become a profitable trader within a year. Today, I'm gonna show you my entire process, how I will eventually perhaps 10x my trading performance this year, and I'm not gonna be trading more than perhaps 2 hours a day. So let's dive in. I want to split the capital into multiple parts, into multiple accounts, so I can focus on different assets and the different trading styles. So as you can see here, I got basically three major focuses. I will split accordingly my capital into the Forex account, the crypto account, and to be fair, I'm not a huge fan of the funded account for many reasons. We might gonna talk about it in the future, or if you just want me to do a separate video, I can do that. But still, I'm gonna capitalize on the funded accounts as well. My major focus will be based on the data on four pairs, which is EU, GU, BTC, and the gold. The crypto also will be a bunch of shitcoins because, well, I'm gonna show you later on. Because my major focus is basically correlated with the funded accounts. That means that my funded accounts will be attached to the personal throughout the copy system. You can eventually think of it that these two accounts, or basically multiple accounts because I don't trade only on one funded account, will be focusing on very similar trading style and the trading setups. And to be fair, if you're asking me about the split, I will simply put 20% of my starting capital, 20% will go to the funded, and the 80% will go to the Forex and the crypto. Big chunk of that 80% will go to the Forex and to my main account. And I will roughly use 20% of my 80% split right here into my shitcoin account, because this way I'm not gonna be emotionally attached to this account. And I found and proved myself from the previous years that if I don't care much about these accounts, I'm rather aggressive and I do really well with the trading altcoins. Funny enough, this 20% of the 80% might gonna be the biggest PNL by the end of the year. But also keep in mind it's the most aggressive one. That being said, with my money management, now we going to my system. So basically, as you know, I'm trading my MVM system. I have two models. I call it MM model and the MP model because eventually it coming back down to my manipulation volume and momentum. But my MM model, which is basically momentum setup, is having usually the lower risk reward ratio but having the higher win rate. With higher win rate, that means I will have much more stable drawdown, very decent return, and it's actually ideal for scalping and scaling my funded account side by side with my personal. This is a very safe trading system for a long run, so I like to use it. This is from the previous year. As you can see here, my equity curve is rather steady. The data basically just looks really nice. Here's a trading example on the BTC that I did recently. So as you can see here, based on that system, it's actually really precise. And as you can see here, pretty much little to no drawdown. So I really like this system. As you can see here, there is also some gold example where you seeing manipulations on the lows. So this is obvious accumulation in the market followed by volume candle executing two trades, riding the momentum level to no drawdown. Really beautiful suite. This is basically my major focus on most of my accounts, and because of very decent return and very stable drawdown, I can use it as my copy trading tool between my personal and funded account. The second model, which is my MP model, who's with me a little longer, know this is basically Snowflake. I call it Snowflake before I kind of develop my MVM system. Now, just to keep it really simple and concise, it's my MP system. The thing is, this one is a very high risk reward ratio trade. Meaning from 1 to, well, to be honest, my biggest trade was 75R, but to be completely fair, I took a partials. So this is not my final risk reward ratio from start to finish. And also I have to keep in mind that I risk rather less because I can make much more. But also it depends on the situation and on the account. Like I said, it has a lower win rate, but it also has a great return, which you can see here. Sometimes it's rather steady, but then when I finally catch something, it does really well. Then we got some market conditions that it's maybe taking a lot of break evens or partial losses, and eventually it starts to take off again. Beauty of the system is, you might see me mentioning, it has little to no drawdown. For a reference, this is one of my setup that I took on the funded account that went eventually bankrupt. That's why I don't have too much opinion on the funding accounts and trying to kind of stay away. But as you can see here, this is really amazing entry, little to no drawdown. As you can see here, there is a little drawdown, but immediately going to the upside. But as you can see here, eventually failed. This setup is well known as my snowflake entry because even though I'm wrong on the bias, I will make at least 3R trade. There is some example of my favorite scaling system, basically stacking up my position without adding additional risk on a trade. That's how I'm basically making the most return, but to feeling completely safe and without emotions. That's why I like to use it on these like alt accounts. These are my two major models that I'm gonna be using. This one will be for pretty much easy, no stress trading performance, which allows me to be a little bit more aggressive with this one, which eventually I can tell that this is gonna make 80% of my returns by the end of the year. Here's my workflow, how I'm gonna approach my trading just by doing 2 hours a day, to be honest. Unless I'm gonna talk or live stream on the Discord, answering some questions, things like that. But solely my trading will no longer be more than 2 hours. There are 3 things I'm gonna be focused on. The first one, if I see a decent market condition, I will simply focusing on 15-minute time frame for intraday setups. Side by side, I will also check if there is some H1 to H4 swing setups. Meaning if I see a decent swing trade, which by the way, as I'm recording this video, I shared last week literally one perfect swing trade. This is what I'm basically talking about. Very unusually, I take a daily positions. That's like sometimes once a month, sometimes like twice in 1 quarter. Basically, if I see a really decent position or really decent setup on the daily time frame, I'm gonna put some additional risk on top of it. But usually my morning routine is very simple. I will just simply use my high probability conditions. I believe this PDF checklist is in the description. If you click on the WOP link, you can join the Discord for free, and there additionally you will get this PDF setup. If I don't see anything really interesting, I will check other market or other pairs, and if I don't even see anything there, I will simply just do something else, because to be honest, I don't need to trade every single day. Sometimes all it takes is just 1 or 2 trades per month and you basically golden. Anyway, move on. I will check if there is some high time frame setup based on the conditions that I already spoke to right here, based on my session and based on the data that I know that usually most of my trading setup happening in a specific window or time period. I will check up if there is something forming in my current session. If no, then I will review the market condition if I can perhaps trade in the next session. This will very likely gonna be for the London session, and if I don't see anything, is it really worth to wait for the New York session? If yes, then I'm gonna walk away coming back on the New York session. If no, again, I'm gonna take a day off. But if there is something forming in the session, I will basically use my checklist and I will wait for volume confirmation to execute a trade. It might gonna sound complex, but this literally takes like 5 to 10 minutes. At first it might gonna take 1 hour, but because I'm doing this over and over, it becomes kind of like a chore. So it's like 15 minutes, and you already know if it kinda worth to trade or not. On a weekly, I'm just gonna do the performance review, really simple. I'm just gonna look at my P&L, how many trades I took, how many wins, losses, stuff like that. And then I will do the review of the market based on my MVM setups. Meaning I will be objectively reviewing the markets and I will measure basically my trades taken versus how many opportunities I got based on my system. And that's pretty much it. I will simply do some self-reflection, and perhaps while I am reviewing the markets, if I see the new variables or basically new data set that I found rather interesting, I will put in notes and perhaps start to testing later on. That's how I usually improving my trading system. Now we coming back to almost the last part when it comes to the P&L. So like I said, my model is mostly for the stable income. So I will use my personal account and the crypto main to basically maintaining this, let's say, stress-free trading, where I can to a certain degree predict my drawdown based on my statistical data. This will basically allow me to have some decent income so I can cover my expenses, things like that, and I can focus a little bit more aggressively on a crazy returns, which definitely gonna happen, especially in the crypto space, where the alt account is what I'm gonna be really bold, meaning I'm gonna be quite a bit aggressive when it comes to the trading, but also depending how many funded accounts I will have at that point, I usually use at least one as my, let's say, more aggressive account where I put more risk per trade. This usually end up with obviously more drawdown, but because I having some stress-free mindset, it's not literally my only trade or my only account that I'm basically trading. I don't pay too much emotional attachment to these accounts that eventually end up resulting in really big P&L over time. Basically with the same trading system, I will use my system for slow and steady scaling. So to be honest, this is also another topic because in the trading space you never know, so sometimes it's better to be a little bit rather aggressive with the accounts and taking the profits rather quickly because they keep changing the rules, adding more bullshit, stuff like that. I'm kinda a little bit conservative when it comes to this, but still my approach not gonna change. I will use basically copy trading tool to slow and steady scale some of these funding accounts. Some of them I using for day trading, meaning 15-minute time frame, but some accounts, usually one or two, I will simply using for the swing account, which proved to be really helpful, especially when I'm traveling or don't have enough time. This is literally super easy to basically maintain. And yeah, like you see here, basically it's my least focus. It doesn't require additional like extra focus because I usually gonna be copy trading. So eventually I'm gonna trade it as my personal account, which is why I kinda said it might not gonna be the perfect scenario for the funded accounts, because by the time I will earn a specific percentage, the rules might gonna change and there is a lot of restriction during the news, which to be honest, that's how I capitalize a lot of P&Ls. But either way, let's move to the last part, which is the execution. The personal account usually will be, as you can see, between half to 5% risk, but let me explain why there is a 5%. So usually my very main account will be 0.5%, but my alt account, my aggressive one, that's usually where I adding 1 to 5% depending on the market conditions, but usually it never go below 1%. Because on the personal account, I really don't care, especially on the aggressive account, if I can be on a 10% drawdown, because with the aggressive account, it's not a big deal. It can be easily recovered, but on the funded accounts, you basically fucked and you're starting over. That's the most annoying part. Basically, I found that there's a lot of trouble with this approach with the prop firm, so I'm not gonna even bother anymore. But I will use my scaling and the pyramiding, which you could basically see right here. This is amazingly and powerful system. It requires a shit ton of attention, but it's literally golden. So I'm gonna be using scaling and pyramiding only with my personal account. I don't want to talk too much into the details with this one because it's not for the beginners, but I just wanted to cover that eventually this is how I'm gonna make the most money. But like I said, high probability setups, if I do have them, I will copy trade my funded accounts, which will usually gonna be 0.5%. Depending on the account, meaning if I'm gonna be above my drawdown, I will use the 1%, but if I'm gonna be around it, let's say between 1% above or below drawdown, I'm not gonna be risking more than 0.5%. And if I'm not gonna see any high probability setups, then I will trade the funded accounts accordingly, basically separately from my personal. Meaning if I need to trade on the funded accounts, I will choose maybe different trading setup or trading model, and perhaps even risking a little bit less, just to maintaining a few bucks on that account, to not lose the account because of inactivity, when I was traveling, I did not paying attention too much on the funded accounts. Yeah, I basically lost most of my accounts because I didn't have a time to trade, not because I am a shitty trader. But either way, that's pretty much entire approach how I'm gonna be trading this year. It might gonna sound a little bit overkill, but to be fair, it's rather simple. I would probably say the biggest takeaway from this video is I'm not gonna be putting all my money into one basket. I will diversify based on the return. I will use two different setups or two different trading models depending on the purposes. I have a very simple, strict and very objective workflow. Focus on the market, maybe like 2 hours a day. Here I just explain how I eventually gonna expecting to have my P&L. And lastly, the execution, that obviously I want to pay attention to high probability setups in order to scale my funded accounts, and using my alt account for aggressive trading. This way I can build up some emotional and financial cushion so I can be more aggressive without additional emotion with my scaling and with my alt account.